I think it's important. I think it's something we should have done last year and didn't. But I think it's very important that we get together and share what we've done over the last year, where things went well, where they went awful, and what we'd like to do going forward. And I will include in that this year some financials and other, what's this organization look like, right? So that we are not only the AT Makers Facebook group, we are also a charitable organization. And I do want you guys to see that, because I think that we're coming up against some limitations when it comes to how we're running this group that I'd like to have your input on. Let's go ahead and get started. Who are we? Turns out there's over 2,000 members in the AT Makers Facebook group, and that's kind of crazy. Those are all people who aren't just reading what we put, because anybody can read it. These are people who actually want to respond and comment and post their own notes. So we've got over 2,000 members, actually 2,100 and something, 60 or so. And I went through and looked at kind of who's there. One of the most important groups, and I think one of the most vocal groups, are actually the parents and self-advocates. So these are people who are AT users in their own right. Often they are also makers, like Chris Young and Carl and Gary. A bunch of people who already are making their own assistive technology and need help. They need either a set of hands, they need people to help them with ideas or debug problems they're having. And I love the fact that they have found us as an outlet and as a resource. A lot of them also are referred here by support groups. So the SMA support group, the cerebral palsy support groups, all have found us as some place they can go to ask for help, and I love that. We do have 7 or 8, depending on how you count, 8 or 9, depending on how you count them, robotics teams that we're working with. Roaring Riptide out of Gainesville, Gravy out of Orlando. We have 2 different Royal Robotics groups. One is in Seattle, and the other one is here in Port Richey. Team 135 is Penn High School in Indiana. Exploding Bacon is in Orlando, as is Super 7. And Full Metal Jackets, I don't know if Dan is here yet. Did a whole bunch of people just leave? What just happened?
There were 2 other folks that were kind of italicized, I noticed, and so I think they had dialed in. One of them could have been Chad.
Gotcha. My whole screen just shifted when that got smaller, so it got my attention. So as long as you guys can still hear me, I'm going to keep going. Full Metal Jackets is Dan Frank's new group. What's that? Go ahead. All right. You can self-mute yourself if you don't want to hear me to hear you. Full Metal Jackets is Dan Frank's new group, and we haven't worked with them yet, but I know he has, and we're going to get them involved. We've got folks from BOTS and GRIP and WEC, which are University of Florida outreach programs. I'd like to get other colleges involved as well. And then we've got folks who are technical pros, and there are various folks in there. Many of them are here tonight, so thank you for joining. Many of you I didn't list on there because I just wanted some examples. And it's also important that we mention the other nonprofits. Makers Making Change is probably the most obvious parallel to us, but there's a bunch of others that we are working with to try and share the load, to try and make that to not overlap, to push people in the right direction rather than try and reinvent the wheel. All right, what have we accomplished in the past year? A ton. We've got Jim's Sip and Puff, David's suction device, Kylie's door opener. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I think it is important that we list them at least briefly so that we have a record of everything we've accomplished over the last year. I should say Michelle's hand raiser, Alex's Bumblebee, Mike's gun. You guys remember Mike's gun project? That's the one where I couldn't use any of the high school kids because we actually fired a real gun. We automated Marshall's garage door and made a dice roller for Julie Marzano. Those are all the projects that came in by request that I could find. I'm sure there are some that we've got in here that are missing. Feel free to add those in the question section or the chat section, or email me them. I am going to compile a true report of this afterwards. We also did a bunch of things just because we could make them lower cost and make them more available. The key switch interface, the light touch switch, the switch isolator, I don't think got enough play given how handy it is. The switchboard, only version 1 is done. We're still working on that. I think John Jordan will take another stab at that. We made some iPad key guards. We've got the eye gaze holders and a door opener for dogs to push with their nose. And we have some things that are consumer product driven. You're going to see this as a goal to get more divided on this. These are things where we are taking existing products in the market and either adapting them or integrating them into an AT world. So the XAC controllers and an absolute ton of toys that we've learned and published how to adapt. We have a few big events that we did this year, and we have a lot of other smaller events. We did the webhooks integration, which I didn't know where else to put in here. That's a good collaboration with 2 AT companies, Cough Drop and PRC. We did an adaptathon in Orlando that made 100 toys and 50 switches and involved a ton of kids from robotics teams. And we had the Maker Day. I showed the pictures at the beginning of this presentation. It deserves its own slide or even slideshow because it was a colossal amount of work. And so everybody who came to the Maker Day, it was awesome. I think everybody at that show thinks that it's the highlight of it's at least the highlight of Saturday, if not the highlight of the show. And we got at least enough credit to keep us going on it. So I would like to make better use of the social media part of that, and it's just kind of slow in getting out. But I think it was probably very worthwhile from getting our name out there as well. All right, this is going to come up later, but it's important to note that we kind of were everywhere this year. We traveled over 30 days. We brought between 1 and 4 people to events around the country. Some of these are true run the day. Like at Gate, I ran the entire Maker Day conference. And in Pennsylvania, I ran a Maker Day prior to their Helix conference, high expectations for low incidence. I don't know what the X stands for. High expectations for low incident something. I don't know. Somebody can type in there what the X stands for. But we went to that conference and did a Maker Day where we trained people how to solder, taught them how to adapt toys, etc. But it is worth noting all of the places we've been this year up until last week. So a total of 30 days on the road, bringing this around the country in person. So what are the programs we're working on? By the way, any questions? Did anybody not see us at these places? Did I miss any place important? I think I got them all on here to kind of walk through what we were doing. I'm sure that some of you have represented us at other conferences that I'm not aware of, which just means we got to make sure I'm aware of it. It doesn't mean that it's any less important. It just means we got to get the pictures back in. By the way, to compile this, we went through all the Facebook posts. We went through all the calendar. We spent a ton of time figuring out what on earth we did over the past year. These are I went through and went through the current projects and the ones we've done recently, and I tried to group them into a set of programs that we are doing, and try to give some examples and some context. So hopefully, I did a mind map. I hope you guys are okay with that. Mind maps to me are the easiest way to get what I'm thinking about out. It's at the center is the organization, but there are 5 programs on here. And we're going to make these more official in 2019. We'll talk about that when we get to funding. But these will be things where if people want to make donations or earmark money and give it specifically to an item, we're going to make these kind of official programs that they can do that with. The top is kind of our core, right? So the top 2 groups here are why we started this. We started this because we want to bridge the gap between assistive technology and the maker world, right? So the maker world is everything from the robotics teams to the maker spaces, and they don't know anything about assistive technology and the needs that are there, the opportunities that are there, and then nobody in AT ever thinks of the robotics clubs and the STEM programs as sources of solutions for them. So that's our core. That's why we started this. It's why I started this. And I think it's still where we spend a majority of our time. I'm not entirely certain that it's a majority, but plurality of our time is certainly spent in those areas. Some of the biggest things we do, some of the most powerful things we do there are the introductions, where all I do is get on a video call and introduce the head of the robotics program to the head of the AT program. And all of a sudden, that chemistry, there's not a lot to do there other than to make the introduction. Maybe go in person, have a conversation with them, smooth over any edges there are. But also the second thing there will be the videos. If you haven't seen it, probably one of the most important videos I've made for AT Makers is one called How to Engage Your High School STEM Program. And it's really handy. It's I would recommend that you share it with your high school STEM program. Every STEM program that I've seen that watched it, like, said, yeah, exactly. That's what you need to know. You can't say that to us, and you have to remind us about that. So I think that those are really important things for everybody to know about. The bottom three are kind of not as well formed yet as they should be. The abandoned tech rescue really is all about IntelliTools. Until we've had more success with IntelliTools, I don't think we'll take on another piece of abandoned technology. But we really want to. We really want to be the place where if somebody is ending a product, and listen, I own a company. I own an AT company-ish. If I decided to shut down Lesson Picks, I would want someplace to send my users and make sure that they were well supported down the road. I'm not doing that, okay? But I want to help provide that. I don't know that it's something that we've done well yet. I will tell you that Alyssa has worked her butt off on it, and at the moment is having some success. We got some help from ATIA, getting introduced to the right people, and we're making more progress than we have been. So that's awesome, but I wouldn't claim we're at success yet. The AT design is probably what most of you think of when you see my videos. It's me showing something cool, or Brady showing something cool, or John Jordan. One of us has picked up a request, had an idea, and has made something using Maker Technologies and has chosen to share it with the community. So this wasn't really in the initial goals, mission, but it is a great step for bridging that gap. If we can bring a guide that an ATP can follow, or they can bring that guide to their robotics team and give them a project to finish, those guides are really powerful. So all of the projects we're doing, all the ones I listed in the beginning, are really valuable and are really important that we continue doing those. So that's the AT design section. And the last is called consumer product and integration and adaptation. And it used to just be called adapted toys. So just so you know what lives there. But I really don't think, if we just want to adapt toys, we should probably follow in the footsteps of other people who just adapt toys, like Santa's Little Helpers or Santa's Little Hackers and things like that. I think that there is more we can do in the consumer product integration space, where we've got the expertise in terms of what AT users need, and we can go to a consumer product company like Microsoft and help them make something that is accessible or available to an AT user. So the XAC, the Xbox Adaptive Controller peripherals I did earlier this month was in partnership with Bryce Johnson from Microsoft. I think there's a lot of value there that we can bring to make sure that they are documenting things correctly, that we are correctly telling them our needs, that we are bringing them directly in touch with the AT users. And you'll see in a later slide that, that there is more we can do here. There will be a couple more programs that I think we should add, but I think it's important we go through where we're failing. And I got a lot of grief about using the word failing or failures, so I made it red and bold in the top heading of the slide, because these aren't just challenges. These are places where we have to recognize that we're failing. And there's more to it than what's on this slide. But our biggest is documentation. If you look at the list that I put up here of projects that we finished, and I have a slightly longer list here if you want to go through it, the number of those that were not well documented, especially that were not documented on a place other than Facebook, is way too high. The percentage is way too high. I will take most of the grief because I'm the one who didn't document the most. The flip side of that is I'm also the one who documented the most. Maybe Eric. Eric might be close, documenting the toys. But there's, other than Eric and I, there has been no documentation from the rest of the community, and that is a failure. As people are making these projects, we have to get them out into a guide, into something that can be shared. This is not just about our site. I have one guide literally complete on the Adafruit Learning Center, waiting for me to pull the trigger, take the last few pictures, add the final links, and get it out. These are failures. We have to do better over the next year. And I think that is our number one failing. From those of you who are from Adafruit, I see Dan Halbert's here. Those of you from Makers Making Change, I would love to hear ideas on how to solve this. And I'd love to hear ones that don't involve me just doing it. So, and feel free to interrupt me, by the way. We have 3 slowed or dropped. We have more than 3. We have 3 notable projects that are failing in my, or at least on the verge of failing in my eyes. The Switch Router 2.0, we are not making enough progress on it, and we tend to think, oh, we found another problem, another solution for Jim Lubin, and we did, and he was the initial driver for that, and was. That doesn't mean we can drop it. This is still a really needed tool in the rest of the community. I know Gary is waiting for it, and the reason we spent so much time on version 1 was we know how useful it would be. So I think that I think that is something we have to pick up again. Danny in Atlanta has been waiting for over a year for a motorized door opener for his barn door. I have no excuse for him. In addition, in the beginning, it was, I don't have a team for you. And I found a team for him. I gave the project to a team, and I have not gotten any response, and he has not gotten any response from them. I have to do a better job of making clear to the robotics teams that these are not projects you can drop. And they're not projects you can claim victory with without actually delivering the product. Because I have seen some of our projects that we got started again, they thought they were done when the project was, when it was working, it was done. No, if it's not in the hands of the end user, that project is not complete, and we need to make sure that that's very clear. I think we could have done a better job on that. Similarly, that's a similar thing there with David's suction control arm. This is David Beckauer. He has a suction device that I made for him that turns on the suction and moves it over to his mouth. But it's far less than ideal. It's going to break. It really could use some more robotics eyes on it. And the folks in Sacramento, I don't remember. It's a Catholic school whose name I should remember. It'll come to me in a minute. They took that and they're working with them, but they're working insanely slowly. And we need to get a cattle prod and get them moving again. And then the last thing that's a failure is sustainability and funding independence. And so before we go on to funding, which I know will take some time, I'd really like to take a break and get some questions and feedback from you guys. Brady, you typed something. Do you want to say something?
No.
Thanks. Brady typed incentivize.
Yeah.
A one-word piece of feedback. Anything else?
I like the idea. He was just, focusing, when he typed that, he was focusing on the guides.
Yeah,
and
I
maybe,
know. He's here. He can talk.
Thanks, Eric. No, I mean, that's what it comes down to, obviously. How do we, there's certain parts of the project that, depending on who you are as a person, you're eager to jump in and to provide your expertise or even lack thereof. The trick is incentivizing to get the the longer impact taken care of, which is the documentation and the guides like you're talking about. So, you know, I don't know if that's going to roll into somehow the funding. I don't think it's always money. You talk about it all the time, but I do think for some people, if you want certain quality, you know, some means of monetary reward is always nice. Yeah, that's really all my thoughts on that.
I talk about the money all the time. So I think you're right. I think there are other ways to compensate people, especially teens. Social proof is very big with them, making sure that they have access to the videos so they can share them. Documentation might need money, right? Nobody likes writing the documentation, right? So I'm not entirely sure how to do that, but I'm open to any suggestions on that front. Chad would like to be unmuted.
I don't see him.
I don't see him either, and he was one of the ones that disappeared when all those people disappeared from my list.
Chad, who are you? Are you listed maybe as somebody else?
Does it list phone numbers?
No. So, Chad, if you want, you're welcome to call me, and I'll put you on. I'll just hold you up to the mic.
Bill, do you recognize all the names?
I mean,
You
I
said
recognize
phone. Is
the
there
names,
a G code?
there's a pin that we can send him if he's on here, but he's not on here.
8429 is the last four of his phone.
So so that's not helping. There is no list of phones.
Okay.
So, as much as I'd love for that to be the help, it's not. So, Chad, why don't you call my cell and I'll put you on, okay? If you don't know my cell, you should know my cell by now. Lori, this will be available as a video later, but I hope you don't leave after asking that question. So, all right. So, no way. Okay, good. So, let me see if I have Chad's number in here. Chad, of all the people I want to be involved in this, Chad Lehman is probably at the top of my list. All right, here we go. Hello, Chad. How are you?
Good. I'm going to try to three-way so I can hear. Well, that'd be awful, because then I'm going to hear myself on the other call.
Can everybody hear Chad other than me?
Yes.
Yeah, you're good. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. I'm moving around and I don't have to go web app on my phone, so I'm doing this via old school telephone communication sort of piece. Around the switch router, and I don't want to speak out of turn, though I may be, but I think Malad, one of our engineers, has something in progress on that, so I can check with him. I'm not sure if Malad's on the
He is.
call or whatever right now.
Malad's here.
So Malad, tell me if you think the file meets that goal or does not have that sort of ability to sort of route multiple switches to different outputs. So that's one piece. In terms of documentation, I agree that's always the fun, less sexy stuff. I've had good success in terms of getting funding for summer students and technical interns. So that's something where maybe either A, I can help with that in terms of having someone that, sorry, getting our cold, tries to build the project provided and then document it. Or on the flip side, whether, I'm not sure, I don't know the states as well, but there are similar sort of technical intern programs or summer job programs that perhaps Bill or the local robotic clubs or whatever can access to actually pay these students a wage to actually do something that they take to a project. They build it, they take the pictures and document it out.
Well, I'm sure we have
lots of projects submitted. There's a video of it working, but not the documentation. That's a big part that we're really trying to focus on as well, is documenting projects so we can scale.
Yeah, and I think we do have the engagement of some great STEM programs in universities, especially UF, right? We've got WeSee and BOTS and GRIP, all of which have kids who could use internships and need work experience. Unfortunately, I don't know whether work experience and something on the resume is going to be enough of a motivator to do good documentation, right? But we can try. As far as Milad, if you wouldn't mind, hold on, I'm going to move you away so it doesn't echo. Milad,
I'll hang up, Bill, because I don't need to talk anymore, and then I'll just go back to regular line. And if I feel really urged, I'll ring your phone again.
That works. Okay. Bye. Nothing like low tech, right? So,
Hello?
hi, Milad. How are you?
Good. How are you? I
good.
just sent a link on the corner as a question. So I have all the code and the PCBs are there. So it's
Okay.
basically similar to your 80 switch, but it's based on the Featherboard. So it has Bluetooth features and it has RGB, the no pixel. So, but it's a bit more expensive. As you know, it's about $30, I guess.
Okay. So let me do this. Let me get you in touch with John Jordan, who is running the 2.0 version of the switchboard. We don't want to replicate work, and that's one of the things we have to get better at. Is honestly, if Harry from Makers Making Change or Chad is going to be at a conference, we should be considering whether we really need to be going there too. The overlap is just so significant that we don't want to replicate work. So I will get you in touch with John Jordan at the end of this. In fact, Eric's making a note of it right now so that I don't forget. Is there any other questions before I move into finance and things like that?
Bill, would this be a place that we could engage Pat Satterfield, who had offered about some master's level capstone projects or mini projects as a part of his curriculum and project wherever university he's at in Georgia?
Yeah, I think you mean Ben Satterfield. Pat's his wife.
Yes. Yeah.
So I've actually reached out to Ben. He has I think he would like to do more end-to-end design projects, but I think he might very well be a great resource there as well. He also has some groups in Atlanta that might help us with Danny's door problem that are more high school related groups as well. So Ben is a big resource that he's listed on our Who We Are as well. So I wish he was here too. But no, I definitely think that he's a good source for this. I think once we know what the program is and we say, oh, we're going to start up an internship program, you're going to get this kind of stipend, you're going to get this kind of documentation, here are our expectations. I think that if we set something like that up, we won't have a hard time finding people who are interested. The question is whether they will do good work, right? And Ben's students probably will because it's Ben. And Dan's students probably will because it's Dan, right? So if we start using some of those resources to do that, I think that's a good idea. And thanks for bringing up Ben, because I wouldn't have thought about him in that context. Let's see, I have a long note from Jake MacGyver to better communicate around overlap. I think you just want me to talk more about the overlap.
I don't know if I'll come through or not. Maybe. Yep.
Yeah.
I just wanted to echo that sentiment. So like, there's lots of different people working on lots of different projects and kind of getting on the same page, similar to our conversation in December around switches.
Yeah.
Just a better way of finding out where different projects are at, which ones still need work, that kind of thing.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair, and it's something that we might be able to maybe. So one of the things I think I need. I don't know a good term for them, right? The military calls them NCOs, but I need people who own a piece of this and run with it independently, right? Otherwise, as you're going to see in a few minutes, we are going to really rapidly run up against the too many things run through Bill wall, like in a crazy way. Not just about the 30 days of travel, but just we're going to run into that really, really quickly. Okay. So I think it's a great idea. And I think that if we can keep the overlap to a minimum and refer people to Makers Making Change. And one of the areas may be on the training, right? So teaching OTs and PTs and speech paths how to solder, Makers Making Change has it down. right? I mean, Chad absolutely rocked at the Maker Day ATIA, whereas last year we had a lot of problem with the instruction part of that. It may very well be that we just say, oh, look, if you want to have somebody teach how to solder, here's Chad, right? He'll bring one of his or send one of his crew, and they're fantastic at it, rather than trying to bundle it all under one umbrella. So I hear you and I agree. Okay. I mean, Mark, I don't know. I can delete them. I don't think I can mark them. Chad would like to be unmuted. All right. Okay. So I think we're good on the. Alyssa, you said you were thinking next year. I want to see if there's a way we can get a more complete count of the participants as they enter. We can get a list of the people who only came here for that because they did that when they registered. But yeah, we don't have a good way to capture who actually went into the ATIA Maker Day. Milad, do you have another question?
Well, the only thought was there were 2 entryways in, whereas last year I think it was a little more streamlined. So I think a lot of people didn't notice the information booth portion of it where there were flyers about where it was, because there were the 2 entryways. I think we not lost people went straight away in, which is great and fine and wonderful, but I think we lost a way to kind of get a count, other than I knew at times I couldn't move around easily because it was so full, but that doesn't tell us in a numeracy form what we're really talking about. And I don't know if there's a good way, because I don't necessarily want to limit them to one place to enter and exit, but just a thought. And that was an earlier thought from when you were sharing about Maker Day.
Yeah, no, I think it's valid. So what I found in other conferences for lesson picks is the only way to get a count of who comes to your booth is to give something away. So you do tickets and a drawing, you do a QR code that they can scan and give their information, something that they have to do if they're going to win it. And then you'll have a count and an email list at the end of it, right? But other than that, and that's usually something cheap, right? It's you win an adapted toy or something. But I think that's the only idea.
Is there any way we could scan badges?
We could probably scan badges. We can't use the cheap way to scan badges at ATIA, but yes, we could probably get a badge scanner. It still requires that we get people to each booth. Oh, you're saying put scanners in each station?
Yeah, and that way you could get not each station, the 2 entrances, and then you could get contact information as well, and that could be useful for follow-up, for sponsorship, for getting interest in various states, looking at disciplines. You could get all sorts of information from that.
You can. As far as the follow-up, we have the luxury of having the full ATIA attendee list, so blasting out an email for follow-up. You're right on the analysis part, but we can do that once. As far as the scanner, it's not a bad idea. I still think getting them to stop any kind of incentive, like something to win, we could do it off of the scans, off the badge scans as well, right? But those are just thoughts. All right, anything else?
Jump on to Jake had made this is Brady. Jake had made a comment about kind of figuring out where everyone's at when we're kind of working parallel on different projects. I believe Makers Making Change uses like a Trello board. Have you considered any kind of project management solution like that, Bill?
So I don't have one. We can certainly set one up. Eric would love that. He'd like anything that organizes us, and he would love to manage it and have meetings about it.
Jake, can you jump on? I mean, is Trello a platform that you think would handle this well for like all the AT Maker projects?
We use it sort of because it's free and there's not, it's just an option. I don't know if that's the best option. There's a little bit of a learning curve, and it's yet another platform, but it's at least a place where you can fairly easily collaborate.
I think having a working list of what projects are being worked on, a public one, would be good for all concerned. I mean, right now, I could show you that in the next room, there's a big Post-it note on the wall, or actually it's a whiteboard on the wall that's got a list of all the crap we're supposed to be working on. That's not effective for the rest of the organization. It is only effective for the crap I have to do. And again, we rapidly run into a bottleneck here, right? But yeah, no, I think it is a good idea. Alyssa says Basecamp is another one that they use in the Florida schools. Yes, and as a nonprofit, there may be a way to get access to that. Microsoft has one as well that I think is free with the we get the Google apps, or not Google apps. We get the Google apps and the Microsoft apps for free through the nonprofit. So one of them should have something as well. I don't know if Basecamp has a nonprofit version. Free is not, as you're going to see in a minute, we need to change how we look at free and stuff like that. Jake, you had your hands up. Are you good?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a comment that we had a volunteer recently start helping us out, and his skill set's really around sort of project management and organization. So that might be another benefit of some sort of project management platform, is it provides another opportunity for someone else to get involved that might not consider themselves like a quote unquote maker. So it's another way for people to get involved, and obviously has the benefit of taking some of the administrative burden off of you.
Yeah, and I think the only big thing there is we have to remember to give them the accolades and the credit that they deserve. I see that at Adafruit. They do a very good job of this, I think. I don't know, Dan, you can tell me if you agree. But Katney is their cat herder, right? She's the person who tries to gather stuff up and manage the current projects, I think. And she gets brought up a lot at their presentations, their weekly stuff, and called out for doing such a good job. So we have to make sure that we do that if we have somebody who is doing primarily administrative and project management stuff, like Eric. And I never talk about him at all. So I do a crap job of it. But we have to make sure we do better, right? All right. So Alyssa, you had a question. You're good. Milad, your hand is still up. Anything else?
Yeah, I just had a comment regarding the documentation. I usually use GitHub, and if you make a README file template, you can reuse it for multiple projects. So you can have some sort of a template to document all the different projects. So that might help.
So we have a GitHub organization, and I'll be happy to add you to it if you have a GitHub account. I think for the software part of what we're doing, that's important. And also for like the EagleCAD files that we're doing, that's a great place to do that. I think a lot of the harder documentation is things like the guides that show you how to assemble, that walk you through how to use it with an end user, the things that accompany the video of showing it in use. And we're failing on that. We have a WordPress site, and we can give access to people to work on that as well. But we have not succeeded in doing that. Okay. All right. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Anything else? I'm gonna put down Alyssa's hand. Yeah. Okay. And Milad, I'm going to leave your question open because I want to keep that link, and if I close it, I won't have it anymore. But I think we're past it. All right, so I think the next thing we need to talk about is money and finances. And the act of making this presentation made me go through what we're doing. And the good news is I'm willing to spend the same amount of money and time next year that I spent this year. The bad news is I'm not likely to exceed it. And I kind of need to walk through, and I don't want to just go to a slide. I kind of want to walk through what we did last year financially and how we managed to do the 30 days of travel, all the projects, and a lot of the design work and solutions that we put out on kind of a very tiny amount of money. So I asked our accountant, our bookkeeper, to say, what did we spend last year and how much of it came from each person. Hi, Mary Elizabeth. I see you came back. I will unmute you. So how much money did we spend last year? We spent $12,000. which is a joke. We spent $12,000 on items. That's toys to adapt and soldering stations and 3D printing filament and all of the other stuff. We spent $12,000. And that's all that's in the books. But that's crazy. So of that $12,000, Lori is my wife, Lori Benko, and Lori and I or Lesson Picks contributed 7 of that. I'm not only willing to continue doing that, I'm willing to continue doing all the other stuff that we're going to talk about in a minute. But for those of you who contributed the other 5,000, thank you. It is hard to get donations out of people. I'm learning that it's much easier to get grants. We're going to talk about that in a minute as well. But the only reason we could do all the things we talked about at the beginning of this, the travel to ATIA, running the Maker Day, going to Oregon, going to Boston, going to everything that was on that list, was because we piggyback on Lesson Picks. And if you don't know what Lesson Picks is, it's why this organization can exist, okay? Lesson Picks is a tool Lori and I created a while ago. It's a fairly profitable AT and special ed company, lessonpicks.com. People pay us $36 a year to make things for their classroom and their therapies. It's easy to use. They love us. We're growing like a weed, so it's great. But it's also why I started AT Makers. I was on the Lesson Picks trips at the AT conferences, and I saw the madness that was the exhibit hall. So there's a lot of things that we don't pay at AT Makers that we would have to. We don't pay any rent, right? So we're inside the Lesson Picks building. We piggyback on them, and we don't pay any rent. We don't pay for any equipment. We use their printers, even like the 3D printer is owned by Lesson Picks. So we've got a lot of that. And then if you look at all of the travel that that was on that other page, you'll notice that every one of them lines up with a conference that Lesson Picks is presenting at. So when we go to GATE, Lesson Picks presents, and all the travel costs are Lesson Picks costs. The rooms, the meals, the airfare, all of it end up being business expenses for Lesson Picks. And it is probably worth about 20 grand just in terms of rent and expenses and travel from that. Now, that doesn't cost me anything. I was going to go to them anyways, right? But I think it's important over the next year, and one of the things I said on those challenges is we are currently not sustainable at all. If Lesson Picks gets bought, if Lesson Picks has a bad year, we're not going to be successful. We're not going to exist. And probably the biggest reason for that isn't the 20 grand. We can come up with 20 grand. It's that 25% of Eric's work time and 50% of my work time are dedicated to AT Makers. And if you add that into the costs associated, so I actually do have a slide on this. One sec. So if you actually want to take a look at what it should cost to run AT Makers, it should cost about $100,000. So that's in terms of salaries and in terms of travel costs, in terms of things like that. Good news is I'm very happy to spend that again this year. This is a cause that I care about. It's something that I knew was going to be a big part of our profits were going to be spent on AT Makers. It's something that I care enough about that I'm willing to do it, and I'm happy to do it. But I also know that we can't continue to grow if it relies on the profits of another company in order to grow, especially one that's not quite as related as we'd like it to be. So I have a goal for 2019, and that is to make us independent of Lesson Picks. So let me go down here. I would like to make this our goal. This our goal? I don't know. Is that right? This our goal? Yes.
Below you for me. It depends on who.
This. There you go. This slide represents where I would like to be at the end of 2019. So we need to be writing grants. it's not hard to get grants written. I've got robotics teams that have made more money in grants than I have put into all of Lesson Picks. We need to be doing that. When you look at what our programs are, they tie directly into the grant targets of lots of corporations, lots of nonprofits, lots of people who want to do well, they want to do good. They've been doing well and they want to do good. They write these grants, and they are very much in our sweet spot. If we go in and say we are going to write a grant for maintaining obsoleted or abandoned technologies, we should be able to cover the cost of that for a year. So we need to be doing that this year. My goal is to keep giving in what we've been giving in, and to add $150,000 in other funds. I don't think it's crazy. And if anybody does think it's crazy, I'll need to call Chad back and have him get back on the phone and explain how it's probably not crazy. Probably will take some actual time. There will be a cost associated with getting this money. I was estimating 1/3 of the money we get in grants will be spent on getting grants, which sucks. It's not what I want to do. It's what Eric wants to do, which is great. But I think it is necessary, because if something happens a year from now and I get hit by a bus, Lesson Picks will be fine because they have Keyman insurance on me. AT Makers will be gone. In addition to not having the funding to go forward, I don't think we have the workload spread out enough to be able to get through that. So before I go into how we would spend that other $150,000, does anybody have any questions about this? Dan Frank just joined. Dan, you came for the best part. It's been all upbeat until the last 2 slides. Any questions? Judy, you're the only one who's not muted. Questions?
I don't have any questions. I'm listening.
Okay. Dan, how about you?
I'm pretty good. I just walked in a little bit late, but I can fill in later.
All right, fair enough. All right. I would love to hear from some of the other nonprofits here how we make this happen. And it doesn't have to be tonight. It can be a follow-up to this discussion. How do we make this happen? How do we go about getting properly structured for these grants? How do we find out where they are? I went to a meeting at ATIA at the Ed Camp about grant writing, and it doesn't seem like this is an unreasonable number. I think it is probably a stretch, but it's probably okay that it's a stretch. And if we get to the 40% contribution in 2 years, I think we will survive, because I'm not going anywhere for 2 years. But I do think it's important. If we're going to have this be a nonprofit that survives a 10-year period, we can't have it dependent on something that is at the whim of the market in terms of Lesson Picks. So let's talk about something more positive, specifically about what else we should do next year. So I have a proposed update to that mind map we had earlier. Hopefully you guys can see this. And I would like, this is something where I am not sure it's correct. So I would like to go through and remove any nodes that don't belong here. And I would like to go through the 3 things that I would like to see added in 2019. And probably the 3 things that I'm most likely to jump behind. So I've added them at the bottom. They're the 3 things that are in cloud form instead of round form. So the first is easy. It's AT standards. It's underneath consumer product integration and adaptation. We have one of our members, Christine Getman from Magic Wheelchair, is currently at the toy show in New York. We should be talking to the toy manufacturers. We should be giving them 5 ways to make their toys easier to adapt, whether that's stick an AT jack on the back and here's the right way to wire it, to here's an I2C interface when you have a more complicated toy, to here's a set of headers and the right, if you make this standard, we won't have to cut open your toy anymore. We should be having that conversation. We should be making those guidelines and making those standards. And I think we've got the expertise in our group to do that. Absolutely. Not just myself. We have lots of people who can go through the adaptations, come up with, AT standards number 1 through 5 that a toy manufacturer can choose. We will help them with branding. We'll promise to make videos of the kids in use. We can help them. I think if you look at Microsoft right now, they are getting a lot of good PR from their XAC commercial. And I think that if we point to that, it's a good time for us to start looking at other consumer product vendors, especially in the toy space and in the game space as well. So PS4 should be doing this, right? So Sony should be doing this. I think we're in a good position given the kind of the straddle we have between the AT space and the technology space to be able to negotiate that. And I think it'll be worth spending some time on. Again, I think it would be something reasonably easy to get a grant written for. Judy, you have a question?
No, I was just going to comment that Lecotech and some of those other groups already have some groundwork done. It would be fairly easy to piggyback on some of the toy standards. And then I think it was Sue Mistrit and somebody, Ruffino, had a, I can't think of Ruffino's first name. They have a toy assessment kind of grid that they've developed. So I think if we examine some of those, we could add some specifications. And there's some toy companies that are already doing a good job with their public awareness. They just aren't making all the adaptations. Like Melissa and Doug do a really great job of talking about how these toys can be used in different ways. It's just a matter of go ahead and put some of those different ways into the toy.
Yeah, no, and your former boss Mark is probably the most valuable player on this type of an effort, right? Yeah. I think he would be outstanding on it, and you as well. Sorry, but if you got the name of those, so sorry, but he's the head of accessibility at what, Virginia Tech or something, right?
Yes.
So he has shifted from AT, assistive tech, to accessibility, which I think actually the connections are going to be more in the accessibility side. To make this happen, but no, if you can send me the names of those groups, I'll be happy to do the research on it. That's great.
Absolutely, and I'd be happy to help.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It totally came out wrong, Judy. I'm sorry.
Make me feel.
I want to talk to the man. No, this is just not. So I get in more trouble with that kind of stuff. So that's not at all what I meant. But no, absolutely, send me that information.
Okay.
So the second says self-advocate support, and this is something that came up recently on three different people. We have some people who are so valuable in terms of their voice in our organization because of the fact that they are both makers and AT users. So Carl and Chris, Jonathan. So Jonathan is a maker and is day-to-day involved, obviously, with his son Max. These self-advocates or parent advocates who are also makers represent a voice that I don't want to lose. In fact, I think they're some of our most powerful voices. I think we aren't making as good use of them as we can. That sounds negative. I mean that in the most positive way in the world. Make use of.
You're good, Bill.
Yeah, thanks. I worry about the fact that we've got a group of people that valuable that their ability to contribute is very fragile. So if Jonathan loses, and I'll use you as an example since you piped up, if Jonathan loses a nurse, his ability to write a guide is going to be gone, right? So whatever he was working on is going to stop because his nights are now spent up with his son. We see this with Chris Young. We've seen it with Carl in Massachusetts. I think we should actually have a program that tries to support these folks. I'm not entirely sure what it looks like, but I think it's something that we are in a better position than most to help. One of the problems we have is, for example, if we wanted to go to Carl and pay him to help with documentation, which is something that he can certainly do, it's income. And if he's on, I have no idea if Carl's on Medicaid or any other support, but if he is and he has any income, it can very quickly destroy his structure. I've learned from a friend of mine that he literally got a check, and it threw him. He got a check from Medicaid, and Medicaid dropped Medicaid on him, because we can go through that story, but we know you can't just send an income check to folks who are in these situations. But I think that as a nonprofit, we can certainly be in a situation to help these folks be able to continue their contribution. So whether that's helping them with transportation, whether that's helping them with a new 3D printer, for example, or helping them with a camera setup, or training their nurses to be able to work on their devices. I think that all of that, and I can talk to an accountant, I will talk to an accountant before we do anything. I think that all of that would count as supporting a volunteer support. It certainly would be reimbursement and not income. And I think it's something that we should consider doing. I am worried that we're going to lose some of these voices, not because they're going to die, but because they're not going to be able to continue to contribute long term. And that's a risk for me. So that's the self-advocate support. And I would love to hear anybody's thoughts on how we can do that, and whether we should do that. Anyone? You'll get back to me by email. You'll get back to me by email after you watch the video.
Bill,
Okay.
the other thing I've heard not just from this is true for me, but also for one of the other people you mentioned, is that your and others' ability to find people and connect them to us is like assistive robotics club, that sort of thing. I think that's pretty powerful. You've done it for other people, other groups and teams, and I know that you've been on me to like go make that connection, and I should and I can. And it's just always, been on that back burner for too long already, and I need to get on it. But I'm just saying I think that is also something that possibly at particular points for people where they're, the support network is changing or they have a new need cropping up. I think that can be huge. So that might be an additional service alongside the like pay someone to do documentation or nurse training, is like, and I know this has been part of your vision from early on, is like make that connection, make that match. I think that's definitely still a relevant need.
Yeah, no, I think so. And I think, I hope you don't mind me using you as an example there. But I worry about this a lot more than I did a year ago. I've seen too many close calls on folks. So I want to. It also would allow. It would also allow folks who might want to help, but would definitely be seen as an employer, be able to work through us, through a grant to us or through a donation to us that was then earmarked for that program. To be able to keep people producing content and solutions, even when they lose the ability to be completely independent, or when they lose the support that they need to be able to do that. Lori, my email is bill@atmakers.org, and I'd love to hear from you. All right, so the other last one is influence and lobbying. And I'm going to turn off this thing and just talk to you for a minute. So I have, feel free to interrupt me if you want to go back to that topic. It's near and dear to my heart. Influence and lobbying is something that I have consciously avoided. I have made the argument that we are not going to fix the problem of AT and funding and things like that from the top, and we're never going to get congressmen to say, let's spend less money on special needs kids, and that system, the problems in the funding system that are there aren't going to be solved with a congressman or somebody raising hell at the top. And I still believe that. Unfortunately, they can be made worse. And I think it is probably worth it for us to be more engaged in watching what's happening as the IDEA law gets rewritten, right? So I don't know if you know, IDEA is getting rewritten. That's the education law, the defined FAPE, 96, I think. It's up for renewal. So there's a lot of work going into crafting that and making sure that that works well. In addition, we've had what I consider to be a bad law passed on behalf of AT users. I can go to the details of that, but basically some things that were pushed down the road with the hope of let's get this right over the next few years were made permanent, even though they were never really correct. And that's it may have been that's the best we could have done. It may be better than cutting funding or going to capped leases and things like that. But I think it might be good for us to have a seat at the table when various groups, ATIA being one of them, are going and representing the AT community. So whether that's Bill being a loudmouth or AT makers having a position as a community, I think we should consider not staying 100% out of this arena over the next year, and maybe consider whether we should get involved. Any questions on that? No. Judy, what do you think about that?
I think that's a great idea.
Okay. Thank you.
Why?
Thank
Because
you.
I'm the only one that's unmuted? Come on,
Yes.
Bill, you're picking on me.
Alyssa, what do you think about that? You're not unmuted too.
I was trying to take the pressure off Judy. OTs have to help each other out. You know, I think both of the pieces that you talk about kind of almost go hand in hand, because if we're going to be looking at how do we support people that we're saying are in that category of self-advocacy, but as an organization, we're not helping them to self-advocate on other levels, I think they both go hand in hand. Because I think, yeah, I mean, how much do I really hold faith that we could get, you know, a law change that would magically make devices funded across every insurance? No. But
Right.
I think it's the onus is also on us, whether you're a user or you're someone who supports users or you're a maker, to not let the voice not be spoken, even though it may or may not make a gigantic amount of change. I think I always want to live on the edge of, you just never know what will happen, and maybe you've got people in Congress or wherever else that have a kid who has a disability that isn't necessarily publicized, and that becomes part of their rallying cry of something they want to take on. So, you know, the OT in me is always going to support how do we self-advocate, and the way that we do that as participants in an organization is to lead by example and be advocating.
So I think you're right. I think that the reason that I have them separate, just to make it clear, let me show it again.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing that they're separate. I just think they go hand in hand.
They do. I think that the big difference here is that if we have the self-advocate support separate, I think it makes this easier for us to dedicate specific resources that come into that program wouldn't also be available for the lobbying. I think that I'm not suggesting that we go hire lobbyists and go to Congress, but that's why I started with influence. I think there are people at ATIA, and I've always said there are great people in ATIA and in these member companies. There are a lot of people at ATIA who probably never read the law, who probably never had the downside of, hey, let's just make this permanent presented, right? And it's maybe as simple as let's just spend some time reaching out to people who already do have lobbyists and who already are, you know, speaking for the AT community. Let's make sure that the technology side, the technologists have some, you know, write an amicus brief, right? Just write something to them that says, look, here's a worry we have about what you're suggesting. And really, it's more about us paying attention to what's getting proposed and having our say in it before it gets proposed, right? I think we have an organization that does that. ATIA does that. RESNA does that. ASHA, to some extent, does that, right?
You need to look at all the other rehabilitation groups, because AOTA also has a platform.
Right. And I think that this may be as simple as, let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's not be an opposing force here. Let's just share our concerns with them when they're doing their own influencing, and make sure that they're aware, hey, this isn't unopposed, right? Like, I think a lot of times nobody ever says, hey, don't do that, right? It's, you're trying to do anything and we're for you, even though some of us might think it's doing more harm than good, right? So I would love to have some people who are interested in this kind of get together and maybe review some of the things that I have concerns about, and you guys can share things that you have concerns about. And we will have to put at least time resources in that, if not financial resources as well. So that's why I kind of pulled it out there. Okay.
Bill, I'll jump in. I got to sign off for now. I'll send you a message. My one other thought is about like corporate outreach. Like, I work for Raytheon. I should really also try to start some sort of AT Makers hub connection point, at least ask around, see what's going on. I saw some types of things going on in the Boston area where my headquarters is that were along similar lines, the community activism thing. So I'd like to see that happen. I'll send you a message.
We actually have lots of recent reaches into Raytheon specifically. So let me know and I'll give you our contacts with Raytheon as well. But it probably is worthy of note that whether it's a program or not, we're going to need to have an effort to reach out to corporate America and share what we need. I don't think it should be a source. It should not be a destination for our money, although maybe it is. I don't know. But certainly we need to make sure that we do a better job of outreach. And to me, that runs under fundraising and community outreach that we need to do better as well.
Well, and I think it's well correlated to you talking about wanting to expand grant applications. If you've ever written any long grant applications, they want data, they want community effect, they want all that data. And not that that's the means to the end of why we would do it, but I think they feed each other well, and that, even if it's a matter of us being able to capture some good user profiles of the Kleenex story of these are the really cool things that make people think differently about technology, or think differently about makers making technology, and the effect it has, that people just don't think about. Well, there are people in the world that can't open a door themselves.
Right.
If you're not in our world, you don't think about that as a fact that is a reality. So I think being able to make the connection to even to funders who this is not necessarily their wheelhouse, I think, us being able to, it would be dual purpose for lobbying efforts and attempts to fund and or support and work with other organizations and companies.
Yeah.
We might
and I'm going to stop talking.
We might also want to tap into Cole Galloway out of University of Delaware, because he is getting a lot of publicity, and he does have a voice with some of the toy companies, and maybe we could expand what we're doing, plus possibly discuss with him, since he does reach out with so many individuals about developing that self-advocacy, maybe getting statements. He does have some statements, at least from the parent standpoint, of the effect of these kinds of adaptations on the lives of their children, the quality of life. And so he's been very generous with his time when we were trying to get a Go Baby Go started up locally. He's hard to tap down, but once you get his attention, he will give you resources on funding and things like that. So it may be worth joining forces.
Yeah, no, I think one of the things we have to, I probably need another one of these. I probably need another one of these mind maps that literally shows all the nonprofits, and you've got Warfighter Engaged and Makers Making Change and us and GRIP and all these groups, and a lot of us are going to be in New Orleans at AOTA. I don't know, Judy, if you're going, but a lot of us actually I think Warfighter Engaged kind of arranged to have 2 rows of booths with nothing but maker organizations. So it's going to be a lot of fun. We're all going to be there. I think that would be a really good time. I think Go Baby Go is going to be there, but I know there's 10 of us, and there's 10 spots, 9 are taken, and I think Microsoft was putting the XAC in the last one, if I remember right. But it's going to be there's a lot of us. I don't claim to have a monopoly on any of this. I think the place where we are best positioned is the relationship with the AT industry, because Lesson Picks kind of lives in that industry, sort of. And then the relationship with the robotics program, and that is getting better. We've got a lot of more teams involved, and we've got like First National and First Florida, First Indiana that we're kind of working more closely with. So those are the 2 things that we have that I don't think all the other groups have. But we've got to be more conscious about. I hate the phrase "stay in your lane" because I don't believe I have a lane. But we have to be more conscious about not stepping on each other's toes, or at least not reinventing the wheel, right?
Right.
So absolutely. All right. So there's people we haven't heard from. Haven't heard from Dan. Haven't heard from Bruce, Caroline. So if anybody has anything, let's just completely open this up to any comments at all from anybody on anything other than the color of my shirt. Which I don't want to hear about. It turns out it really rocked. Everybody knew who I was at ATIA. So other than the color of my shirt, if anybody has any topic about AT makers that you'd like to ask a question, now's your chance. Go for it. And if you don't, in 5 seconds, I'm going to pull the plug.
So, Bill, it says that this is being.
Go ahead, Dan.
I was going to say, it says this video is being recorded. Where can I find the link to watch the beginning that I missed?
So everybody who actually joined us will get a link in about 3 hours, emailed to them automatically. You may have to enter your email again. I will also, once that's done, it takes about an hour and a half, I will export that, post it on YouTube and Facebook as well.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not sure how many people will watch it, but I'll post it.
Bill, who are we going to get Milad in touch with?
John Jordan.
John Jordan. Thanks.
And Dan Halbert, I have it on good authority that Lamore and Phil will be watching this later. Oh, you were muted. I'm sorry, Dan. Are you okay now?
Yeah, no, I'm fine. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Do you have any questions?
Okay. No, because I don't know a lot of this. I don't really have anything to say. I mean, about learn guides, I would only say that you can, as someone else said, if you can enlist people who aren't necessarily makers but have those skills, journalism students or something like that, people from the school newspaper, whatever.
Do you have any MIT students?
No, I have no MIT students. But I mean, in a robotics group, there will be people, or in a high school or something, there will be people who are not going to be in the Lego robotics club or something, but are interested in assistive work of some kind, and to sign those people up to say, yeah, we need documenters and people who can take photographs and stuff like that. That's those, and then those people will feel wanted. So that's the point. Yeah,
I agree.
That's all
Milad, it's all good. Milad, you have your hands up?
Yeah. So regarding the PS4 issues, so they don't have a accessible controller right now. So I'm working on it's a prototype right now, but it's similar to the Xbox controller, but it's all open source. But I'm looking for some testing, so if anybody is interested.
The right group for that would be GRIP. That would be Morgan Thomas. She's in our group, in the Facebook group. They do lots of PS4 and PS3 adaptations. I'm sure she would love to test what you've got, and she's got quite the crew to do it as well.
Oh, great, thanks.
All right, so Eric, will you send Morgan Thomas's information as well?
Send it.
Yeah, I will. I'll introduce the two of you guys in an email.
Excellent.
All right, thank you.
And Mary Elizabeth, I'm going to put your hand down, Malad. Mary Elizabeth, did you catch any of that? Are you on board with everything I'm saying?
Can you hear me?
I can.
I am absolutely on board, and I would love to help out with some of the grants. I think that's an awesome idea. I have some experience with that with Project V-Day, so I'd love to share that.
Excellent. All right. So I think my next. So there are no other questions. Oh, Carolyn, what can I do for you?
Not so. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Not so much a solution, but just throwing another idea in there. As you're starting to build up these guides and things, I'm thinking about when particularly robotics teams are reaching out to some of these places to find the individuals to partner with. Sometimes therapists and groups don't know what they don't know, if you know what I mean. So I'll speech therapists as an example to throw my own profession under the bus. A lot of them don't even have a course in AAC as an example. So I'm wondering if there's a way to tag these things as we're creating the system or archive with maybe some distinguishing features or things so that maybe they can search in that manner, if that makes sense.
So this is a beginning project, or here are the things you should know before you know this, that kind of stuff?
Well, or even just, a robotics team is looking for someone to work with. They reach out to an SLP in their school system who works with individuals with disabilities or something and says, we have this capability. That therapist might not understand what you guys do, let alone the types of things that might be helpful to their clientele. So
Right.
having somewhere can be tagged where they can say, okay, but I have an individual with Rett syndrome, for example. They don't have fine motor. Well, okay, we have these great switches, or we have, you know what I mean?
Gotcha.
So help facilitate and make that connection. It might make it easier to help with the matching up of individuals, and I'm thinking about the robotics teams mostly.
Right. So this is something where so what we'd really need to have to make this work would be, if in your case, a speech path or maybe an OT who is an AAC. Like, look, we grab Carol Zangari and say, here's some starting points that people might have. Like Rett syndrome is a good example.
Mm-hmm.
What are the things that they might be looking for?
Mm-hmm.
We're not assuming any AAC knowledge, right?
Exactly.
And we're not even assuming that they're going to reach out to FAST or somebody else to get AAC knowledge. This is going to be, I have no idea what to do for my girl with Rett syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
Girls, right? Girls Rett syndrome, I think so.
Can be boys actually, but yes, mostly girls.
Okay.
As long as you avoid the diagnosis and maybe do more of a feature match, discuss,
Yeah.
I have someone who can't use their hands, can't speak out loud, whatever, and they need to be able to do A, B, or C.
Right.
So
Yeah. Okay. So maybe the answer is, Judy and Carolyn, I don't know if you guys know each other, but there you go. You do now. So it sounds like both of you are Carolyn's a speech path, Judy's a OT, but you're both awesome, and you're both in Orlando once a year. Carolyn, you were probably at the Maker Day. Judy was the one making all the adapted art projects. But I like the idea, Carolyn. I worry, I think Judy heard my worry as well. I worry about trying to work off of diagnoses because I'm not sure we're qualified. But as far as needs, matching needs to solutions, I think that's a valuable way to do it, right?
And that would make sense. I'm just thinking about as these, the limited experience I've had speaking with the robotics, their ability to kind of explain what they're looking for in a project or clientele. And I'm thinking some therapists even hearing that pitch, trying to make the connection with the people they're working with, something like that, even if it is like a feature matching matrix or something, or I don't know how we want to do it, or even just straight up tags, a PDF, something might just help facilitate that conversation in terms of what needs they can assist them with meeting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay.
Well, and I think also from the OT end as well, it is they don't know what they don't know. And I actually had a conversation with Carol Zangari because I was in her pre-conference at ATIA about this very thing about, it's great. And I refer people to Practical AAC all the time, but I have to be very selective how I refer them to a specific article. Because if I were just to say, hey, this is a great resource, they're not necessarily as OTs making the connection to this is about the specific kid. And we preach all day about doing feature matching when we're talking about looking at AT. So I think if we could do a feature match that wasn't tied so specifically to, that was tied to area of need or, you know, task. And to me, I would look at doing a task analysis because I'm an OT, you know,
Right.
and just like, these are the tasks that, you know, a person might need to do throughout their day. And these are the tools almost, or things or resources you could supply.
Can I ask a question? So when we're talking about feature matching, what do vendors do? Because it sounds like what you're suggesting is something that as a vendor, I would want to do this. I would want to put out feature matching for my products, right? But how do they get, where is the line there before it becomes recommendations and diagnosis and treatment?
So I can tell you for like AAC, there's some standard ones that are out there. We just make a grid with kind of features of the system or program and checkboxes what programs follow it. And there's a few out there, and I can certainly send you some examples if you're interested of really common ones.
Okay.
Kind of looking at this project would meet these needs.
Is this something like communication matrix, or is this something less complicated?
No, this is less complicated.
Okay.
It's different. It's not an assessment tool. It's more of a I'm looking for something that would meet these needs, and this is the product that theoretically meets
it. Does the student need, you know, synthesized speech? Do they need recorded speech? Do they need symbols? How many things do they scan from in an array? So it's really breaking down like what are the things that they would need, and then trying to make some matches, so that it would be a broader support. Because if you've met one young lady with Rets, you've met one young lady with Rets. Right. You know, trying not to kind of I mean, we know some commonalities, but that doesn't necessarily equate to a tool. Whereas a need that a young lady with Rett could possibly have could also be a need that someone with cerebral palsy could have, because they both at some times can affect the upper extremity function.
So you want to, it's almost like feature matching meets set. You really want to describe what something would do, and then set describes the individual, the environment, and the things that they're expected to do. So one describes the tool and one describes the person and the environment, and you bring them together.
So just so we don't overlap, does this exist in any of the nonprofits out there today?
I don't know, honestly. I just was, you know, when we were talking about documentation, I was just thinking that would be, as we're coming up with how these things are being added and creating some kind of inventory, wouldn't it be great if we could enter them all at once at the same time? So I did no legwork on this idea at all. I can certainly look. I don't know if anyone else knows off the top of their head of one that exists already. I have not seen one.
Okay. Jake, you've got your hands up.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a note that this is something we've identified as a need, but we haven't actually made the tool. But what we're trying to do is sort of formalize our design process a little bit better. So before we actually start designing, we sort of do that identification. So, you know, this particular switch would be aimed at someone who has low strength but good targeting, or something like that. And that could be used and pulled into a, you know, a database or a tool that would then help, you know, AT professional or SLP, you know, locate solutions out of a set of, you know, a set of designs.
Where would that live if we didn't take it on? Where would we find something like that?
I don't know. That's it's just that's it's that would be the dream, I guess.
Okay.
Able data has some of that. It's probably not as refined as I think what we're describing that we think would be great, but able data could be an example.
Okay. So let me ask you this. So one of the things I need to be better at is picking a lead and letting them run with this, with various parts of this that aren't, listen, I'm a computer engineer, right? I do not have the skills to run this part of this. I can certainly write the database and do the web interface, but populating it is certainly not something that I can do. What's the best way for me to get, so it looks like Carol and Alyssa, Judy and Jake all have you're all in agreement that this is needed, and I think you all have a pretty much, you're looking in the same, you know, degree, right, same direction. Alyssa, you already have something. I'm not giving you this.
Correct.
Yeah. So,
I was
Carol,
just going to say that. I just put in the you know, in the theory of work smarter, not harder. I always get it backwards. I just put the tech matrix. I put the wrong link at the first time. in there. I'm wondering if there's somebody we could reach out to and partner with instead of let's start and create this thing from beginning to end, because they kind of do what we want them to do, not necessarily from the maker end of things, but I think, I've had some conversations with them before in the past about adding and changing things. They've been very open to, to amending things. So they might be a resource since it exists already.
Okay.
That gives us the framework to think about, okay, what would we want to add that relates to kind of the mission and the vision and the everything for AT makers, because you can drill down and look at, it's built right now as grade level. That's one of the things I'd ask them is, I have a 23-year-old. I would really love to be able to refer you, but they kind of get turned off when they see, grade level on there and they said, yes, we know, we're working on it. But right. I mean, in terms of school-age kids for a whole, this model and or incorporating and working with them to include what we're going for might work instead of us reinventing the wheel.
Okay, so let me do this. So we can't stay on this much longer. I think this is important, and I like the idea. Much like the database that matches a maker and the person who's looking for a solution, I don't want to create another competing database. So let's do this. Carolyn, can you email Alyssa, Jake, and Judy, and copy Eric if you don't have their emails, or start a thread on the Facebook group to talk about this? And if you wouldn't mind temporarily being the point on this, just so that it's not me, I want to make sure we capture this need. If it's something where we need to make a program to make it happen, I want to get it, classified and on our list. But I also want to find the best of breeds and push behind them. For example, I know Malad, you're here from Makers Making Change, and hopefully Chad is still listening as well. I want to do something a little bit different this year. If the right answer, for example, is Makers Making Change is well funded to make or has funding to make a directory of makers and what skills they have, and only those that are interested in AT, I would rather this year go help them, go to Vancouver and spend a day helping them put that together, or get a call together with our folks to help them get the requirements correct or do beta testing, rather than trying to recreate it. In fact, even on like the Team 135 stuff, the Mission to Engineer, which is making its own database of robotics teams, it's great, but let's also get them into the Makers Making Change database and make that the official one, right? If somebody's got enough, when somebody meets the critical mass of a tool, push behind it, right? So I want to make sure we do that one. And if this one, if TechMatrix or somebody else is the right tool here, let's pick one as a group, support it, and help them make it better until it doesn't work, right? In which case we stop. But I want to make that a goal this year, is to get behind the ones that already exist and not create our own. So Carolyn, can you do that for me?
Absolutely. I'll post something in the Facebook group. I don't think I have everyone emailed, but I'll do that this evening.
Okay. All right. And then if you ever need an email and it doesn't seem, it's a professional email, not somebody's personal email, feel free to email Eric and he'll find them. Right, Eric?
Yep.
Yeah, you go. So, all right. Anything else? Mary Elizabeth, you haven't said anything yet. Are you good? I'm going to take it to everybody.
I'm good. I'm at Walmart with my grandma right now, so I've been listening.
All right, fair enough. Okay, I think we're good. I think this has been productive. Oh wait, Lori, I'll jump in here. Lori, you may unmute yourself, but if not, I'm going to read your question. Okay. So Lori Costanza says, I'd like to jump in here as a speech path who works extensively with AAC users. I have access to high school robotics and can reach out to a RISD grad who helps teach toy making at MIT. That's Rochester. Lori,
Rhode Island School of Design, industrial design student,
Gotcha.
graduate. Yeah.
Um,
My husband's a great resource too. We just
Good.
start, just don't know where to begin.
Well,
We're in Philadelphia.
start in the Facebook group and read what's been going on.
Mhm.
You said you're in the Philadelphia area?
Yep.
So you should probably meet Mary Elizabeth. She's in the Philadelphia area.
Okay.
And
Mary Elizabeth too.
okay, good. And so we'll be happy to introduce you to the right people, and we'd love to have your help.
Love to help.
Yeah.
Thank
Good.
you.
Excellent. All right. Anybody else? Okay. All right. I appreciate it, everybody. You will get a copy of this email in about 3 hours. Email. You'll get an email with a copy of this video in about 3 hours, and I will post it up to Facebook and YouTube as well. And I really appreciate this. If you guys have thoughts on the funding, obviously that's the hardest thing to talk about, but it's probably the most important this year. So I would love your input on that. And I appreciate your time this evening. Good night.